Good morning. You might have noticed that we are trying to understand this new technology, so we will start this meeting momentarily once we figure out how all the microphones work. I think we've learned that we don't need to lean into them or we'll startle you all. All right, good morning and welcome. I'll call this meeting to order. My name is Jane Dolan. I'm the Vice President. Our President, Bill Edgar, is not able to join us today. We do miss him, and we acknowledge that he would be here if he did not have a compelling need to be with his family. I know hearts and minds and thoughts are somewhat seen as not very meaningful, but we do give our thoughts to our president and his family, and we'll proceed the best that we can. I'm going to just begin this meeting first by asking for a roll call so that we do know we have established a quorum. And then we will immediately go to our first item, which is a welcome, thanks, and other wishes to Colonel Ray, the outgoing commander of the Sacramento District for the Army Corps of Engineers. Then we are going to take a photo with him. And during that break, everyone is welcome to visit a bit, it won't be a long break, and have refreshments in the meeting room that's right off the entry to this room. And we'll reconvene and then we'll start our regular business items. All right? Happy to have you all here. I don't have the lengthy introduction that our lovely president usually gives, but just want to remind you all that there is a Wi-Fi available. You'll have to figure it out because I haven't. And if you wish to speak, we have speaker cards, except those of you for item 8 who are listed and been invited by Mr. Soon. We already know to call upon you. And if you would deliver them to someone here, we'll make sure that you're called for your item. If you have a cell phone and you've not turned it to mute, do so. Because if it rings, it's a $50 charge to our refreshment fund. All right, Mr. Jones, our board clerk, will call the roll, then we'll proceed with our resolution item.
Board Member Ramirez. Here. Board Member Valines is absent but expected. Board Member Countryman.
Present.
Board Member McDonald. Here. Vice President Dolan.
Here.
And President Edgar is, as noted, absent.
Okay, we're here and we have a quorum. So, thank you all. We're going to proceed to the first item, which is a resolution for Colonel David Ray, who is present and will come forward. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to ask our executive officer, Leslie Gallagher, to introduce and acknowledge this item.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Colonel Ray. It's really my privilege to address you today on behalf of Board President Edgar and myself and present you with Resolution 2019-15 from the board, recognizing your service to the state of California and your capacity as district commander for the last 3 years. I know the other board members will also have an opportunity to speak in a bit, but Bill asked me to send you his best wishes and let you know that nothing short of a family medical emergency could have kept him from being able to address you personally today. Thankfully, he did have an opportunity to speak to you at that wonderful luncheon we had the privilege of attending, but we didn't have the rest of our board there, so we were waiting for today to give you our goodbye. So thank you for being here. The work we do is vital to public safety, and we could not have a successful collaboration between the federal and state government without close coordination between the Army Corps and the board, and you've really made that easy for us. It's truly been a pleasure to work with you for the last 3 years. I have 2 stories, one professional, one more personal to share rather than going through this resolution, and I want to start with the professional story. You arrived in May 2016, which was about 6 months after I was appointed to the position I now hold with the board, and I was immediately struck with your grasp of the issues that we have that are unique to California and your willingness to work through problems, such as the downtown Yuba City levee emergency in the 2017 high water events. I know President Edgar and I both at the time we attended that first meeting, we kind of looked at each other and said, boy, there's no way we're going to be able to get this fixed in time because the Army Corps just had no identifiable process to get what we all agreed needed to be done. But you somehow managed to get that done, get a 408 processed in record time. We got those fixes done, and I can truly say I'm going to miss your leadership and complex problem-solving abilities. I know how stressful it is to solve all those problems, though, day in and day out, and I know you don't intend to stay around California for too much longer, but I did want to give you a gift, a uniquely California gift on behalf of the board. It's from Napa, so not exactly Central Valley, but it is one of those items that has no barcode and isn't distributed anywhere, so if you want refills, you're going to have to come back and visit us every once in a while. Now for the next story, a little more personal. When Colonel Ray first came to town, as happens with many military families, he wasn't able to bring his family initially. They had school to finish and closing up their house in their prior area. We also had some intel that he was a Denver Broncos fan. So a lot of you may not know it, but Jeet Dua, our board counsel, is an Oakland Raiders fan and has been for many years. So he organized a trip while Colonel Ray was first out here for about 10 of us to go out to the Raiders-Broncos game. And we went early and we tailgated and we got to see all of the fans out there, including, as Michael Wright reminded me, a Raiders fan dressed up carrying a severed horse's head out in the parking lot. So Colonel Ray shared with me recently that that was about the only time that he's been in the state of California that he was a little bit worried about safety when we were at that game. But thankfully, the Broncos played so badly that day that we didn't have to worry about any kind of difficulties, and we were able to peacefully exit. But to ensure that you never forget us in your time here in California, we wanted to give you a couple of item from the staff. This is from Jeet and I and the rest of the staff who went with you that day. We've got a can cozy for you when you're sitting on your porch looking at the 40 acres and something for your den so that you can always remember, add to your pro football memorabilia collection. I know you are soon to be a civilian, and I know we've had a chance to talk a little bit about what that's going to be like to finally be in charge of your own schedule. So I hope you're looking forward to some leisure time. I know that takes adjustment. Bill and I wish you the best in your endeavors and a safe trip to your new home. And with that, Madam Vice President, I would turn that over to any other board members for comments.
Thank you for that. And I do know that Bill, our president, had a lot to do with her remarks, and he does wish that he could be here to say thank you. It's been great to work with you. I acknowledge all of that and associate myself with Ms. Gallagher and President Edgar's remarks. Are there other board members that wish to share anything at this point before we take a photo? Anna?
As a 20-plus year Corps of Engineer employee, I know how important it is for the tone and direction that a colonel brings to the position. And it's been remarkable how customer-friendly doesn't seem exactly right, but how proactive you were in ensuring that the local views and concerns were heard and expressed and helped move our projects forward in a really exceptional way. And it was very noticeable that this came from the top, that everybody at the Corps understood that this is one team working together for protection for everybody. And I really thank you for that leadership that you brought to the position. Thank you so much.
Nicely said, Mr. Countryman. Thank you. Mr. Ramirez?
So Leslie stole our story. We can't use that again. And I would have used that. And I want to echo what everybody said about Bill as well. I know he really wanted to be here. But I also wanted to say thank you. I think there's a long history for the institutions, but the people make a really big difference, and you really set a very high bar. And I think your folks are excited about that, the people that are going to be here to carry on. So thank you very much for all the work that you've done. Really appreciate it.
Nicely said. I also want to acknowledge that we have a representative of an ex officio member, Assembly Member Eduardo Garcia. Catherine Freeman is here, so we're happy to have you. Got to acknowledge that. All right, we ready for the presentation, the resolution, and the photo? Okay, we're gonna take a break. Everyone up here goes down there with our favorite colonel.
Yes.
And I know you're gonna
And that, in a formal manner, but just a couple words. Um, that I am, I am extremely appreciative and very honored to be recognized by the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And this is, um, it, it is a, ultimately this is a team sport, taking care of our communities and the people that live in them. It's a testament to the commitment to collaboration on the part of members of the board, the organizations that work with them or for them, and the members of the Army Corps of Engineers that live right here in these communities and are just as focused on ensuring that the city of Sacramento and all of the communities up and down the Central Valley are taken care of. So I have been extremely blessed to have the opportunity to work with a workforce of professionals with experience and expertise that is unmatched, as are the professionals that work across the board in your supporting organizations, Department of Water Resources, the local maintaining agencies, all exceptional water professionals committed to making the communities better in many ways. So thank you very much. So I accept this honor on behalf of everyone. And it has been great to just have an opportunity to meet and engage with all of you, very distinguished individuals, folks. Done a lot for your communities and for the city of Sacramento, and Joe Countryman, who saved Sacramento, I think, in '86 on the top of Folsom. But there are things to take away that as an Army officer, the uniqueness of having this opportunity was there, and I've been very blessed. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Dalton.
Colonel.
Thank you.
I apologize, even though I'm the spouse of a veteran. President Edgar would not have forgotten the decorum there, so my apology to you all. Thank you very much for your kind remarks.
Thank you. All right.
Good morning again, and calling on board members and staff. As soon as we're seated, we will open the meeting. Okay, we'll reconvene. Mr. Countryman's ready. Thank you all for your patience with that. I hope that you enjoyed it just a bit. We wanted to acknowledge our great partner. We have had the roll call and the quorum. We will take up the approval of minutes. I'll take off the vice president's hat, put on the secretary hat. Mr. Jones and I will get this together so they go out with the whole packet, not a few days later. But we have, you all received this week the minutes of May 24th. Do you have any comments, questions, edits? Then I'll ask for a motion to approve. By Countryman, second by McDonald. All in favor indicate aye. Aye. That passes 1 to. All right, indicate yes. All right, the minutes are approved by unanimous vote of those present. Thank you. I will ask our executive officer, Ms. Gallagher, to review the agenda, please.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I have just a couple of items on your consent calendar. Item A and C, the staff report for each of those indicated we did not have a core letter. However, the core letter has been received for each of those, and there should have been a copy for your review sent out. On item 8, as noted, we do have an invited speaker list. Those were sent out to you earlier this week. Everyone should have had that. That's also available at the website. And other folks who would like to speak on that item, you're certainly welcome to speak on that as well. For item 9, you'll note that we do not have our normal update from the Department of Water Resources. However, we do have a written report from them, and I have assurance from Deputy Director Koch that they will be back again next month. Your EO report on board's administration was sent yesterday, and you also have a copy of that. That was not in the original packet, and we do have no closed sessions today. And those would end my review of the agenda.
Thank you. Questions from board members? There are none. I have no indication that any item on the consent is asked to be removed for discussion. So let me pause to make sure. Okay. We have 6 items on the consent agenda. A permit for Wickland pipelines in Yolo County, West Sacramento flood control, Southport levee floodplain restoration, Sacramento Department of Parks and Rec, fixing things, a resolution to be presented at a future time for our very wonderful Congresswoman Doris Matsui of the Sacramento area, adoption of the updated calendar regarding the revamped executive committee membership, and approval of sending support for Water Resource Reform and Development Act 2014 submittals. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Moved by Countryman, seconded by McDonald. Thank you. Any discussion at all, board members? All in favor indicate by saying yes. Is that right? Aye, aye, aye. Are there any no votes? All right. The motion passes unanimous of those present. Thank you. Moving along. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board on an agenda, on an item that is not on our agenda? You are allowed to do that. We're not allowed to do anything other than say thank you. Okay, I see none. So we will go to item 7. And I will invite forward our Legislative Director Policy Advisor, Darren Soon, to introduce this item. Good morning.
Darren Soon, Policy Advisor and Legislative Director for the Board. Just want to give a quick update on our progress. You'll recall back in May, we heard through the media, we heard about the unauthorized encampments along the river systems and how it's been affecting the integrity of our levees. Since then, Assemblymember Jim Cooper has taken up the matter himself and has put forth the bill AB 137. I wanted to give the board an update on the status of that bill. It passed in the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Water on July 9th on consent. Members, there was no opposition, and the letters of support were submitted by RD 1000, RD 999, and the Central Valley Flood Control Association. I have in the audience today a few folks from the local maintaining agencies here to speak to this bill. I also want to recognize our colleagues and friends from the Assembly Water, Parks and Wildlife Committee, Chief Consultant Catherine Freeman, and her colleague Keith Chilano is here as well. I'll come back to that, but I wanted to actually first invite Kevin King from RD 1000 to come say a few words.
Good morning, Board. Just wanted to first off say thank you to Darren and Jit and the rest of the board staff for helping move this legislation forward.
Excuse me, would you just state your name, please?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry.
My name is Kevin King with Reclamation District 1000. I'm
Thank
the
you.
general manager at RD 1000. Just want to thank staff for helping move this legislation forward and getting with Assemblymember Cooper to carry that bill for us. I was at the Senate hearing committee. As Darren mentioned, it was on consent, and I'd like to say it was so well written that there were no questions on that bill as it was presented. So anyway, just really like to first, again, thank the board for taking this issue up for us. And we really feel that this legislation is important and will give us the tool that we need to work more closely with the local enforcement agencies to prevent further degradation of the levee system. So if there's any questions from me, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Darren.
Thank you for being here. Any questions, Mr. King? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next, I'd like to invite up Chris Newdeck, representing KSN Incorporated and San Joaquin River System.
Thank you. Chris Newdeck, Kelson Seneca Newdeck, representing a host of reclamation districts throughout the Delta, but predominantly today on behalf of our San Joaquin districts. We too want to thank the board and JIT and others in presenting this matter before the legislature and endorsing it. This is a very troubling matter. We're all aware of it. It's been an ongoing issue. It's getting exponentially worse. And I say that in a manner I think we can all recognize. We see it more and more often. It seems to be surrounding our levee systems, given the nature of the adjoining water courses and so forth. San Joaquin County has been addressing it. They've had public outreach meetings. They've had neighborhood watch meetings. There's no silver bullet, yet this particular piece of legislation will certainly help the public safety folks in endorsing the protocol in the sense that this is a dangerous condition that we're undertaking in the sense that they're excavating and covering and minimizing our ability to see the flood control structures. So we're very pleased. We were fortunate to play a very large role in the legislation. Kevin, our firm, of course, the board staff and so forth are able to speak on behalf of the entities and work the language to the extent that it was worked. We believe it's a reasonable bill. So thank you again, and we appreciate your assistance on this. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Nudek? Thank you for
Thank you. Have a
your
good day.
comments.
Thank you, Chris. Tim Kerr, who's General Manager for the American River Flood Control District, was unable to be here this morning, but he did want to also express his thanks and appreciation. Their board also took action to approve this bill as amended. And what I'd like to do is come back next month and at the next board meeting and request that this board take a similar action on this bill. I know also last Friday, his district facilitated a tour with some of the board members, and I thought maybe for members of the public and folks who weren't able to attend, we could maybe talk about that tour as well.
And we will. We have asked this item to be on each agenda for either information or other actions that we may wish to take for people to comment. It's important, and we need it to be front and center for us so we can work with our local agencies to resolve issues. And I do want to say that the American River Flood Control District did invite board members and staff members to come with them, their staff, to tour so they could show in person with the eyeballs what their presentations of PowerPoints did provide to us. So on Friday, July 19th, I took advantage of that. I ended up in a vehicle with board member McDonald, Michael Wright, and we did get to tour, and it was informative. Certainly emphasized what we have been told and what we live with in our own communities. So I wanted to say that. Other board members want to share?
New technology. I think this bill is one of the most important things that we're going to do this year. But as a board, we really haven't talked about it in any detail, and I'd like to do that now. I support the concept of this bill, but I strongly disagree with the language in the bill, and for two reasons. First of all, the language defining what would be illegal is unclear, vague, and I don't think most of the public would understand what we're making a crime. And secondly, I think that the expanded coverage of the bill beyond the levees is going to run us right into the middle of the Ninth Circuit decision. So let me explain those two things. The bill adds, under current law, it is illegal to cut or alter a levee. And this bill would add eight new things that are illegal that you can't do. The first three are deface, destroy, and modify. Those really aren't any different than alter, so I don't think they really add anything. But we have 5 new concepts, and those are to conceal, to use, to occupy, to physically obstruct, or to visually obstruct. And a lot of you are probably familiar with the American River Parkway. If you can imagine going over there, and at every entrance to the American River Parkway, there was a big sign that said, "It is illegal to conceal the levee." I don't think people would understand what we're talking about. How do you conceal a levee? And that's the first one of those. Or another one, it's illegal to occupy the levee. What does that mean? Does that mean a guy sitting on the top of the levee, watching the sun go down, having a Diet Coke? He's occupying his chair, and he's also occupying the levee, and is he committing a misdemeanor? Then there's, so imagine a sign that says, it's illegal to physically obstruct the levee. Are people going to understand what that is? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think the answer is no. People are not going to understand what we're talking about. What is it that we are making a crime? If you make something a crime, it needs to be articulated in a way that is clear of what the crime is. And I don't think that we have adequately, we have done that. So, I mean, imagine this sign at every entrance to the American River Parkway. It is illegal to camp on the levee or within 20 feet of the levee. Now, that's understandable. And I think maybe we ought to think about trying to define what is a crime in something like that. My second concern is in the expanded coverage in the bill. Current law says it is illegal to cut or alter the levee. This bill takes that farther and says it is illegal to cut or alter, and all these other words, the levee or anything else in the state plan of flood control. So what is the state plan of flood control? The state plan of flood control is defined in the Public Resources Code as the levees, the weirs, and the channels. So it kind of like it's between the levees. So what the city of Boise did that started a lot of this, city of Boise came out and said, they passed an ordinance and said that people cannot sleep on public property. Well, this bill does essentially the same thing. We're saying that you can't sleep, can't camp between the levees. What the Ninth Circuit said was if you're gonna do that, city of Boise, you've got to provide an alternative space for someplace else for these people to go. And we're not proposing to do that. So I think this is an overreach. And I think what we ought to do is we ought to keep this narrow, stay with the levee. If we want to step out and go into the middle of places like the Parkway and a lot of other places, we ought to do it in a serious way, working with a lot of people, but I think this is a real overreach, and I think if it went to court, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that, the people who are kind of would be on the other side of this are going to say, you just did a city of Boise. Anyway, those are my comments. I know the staff is going to be thinking about amendments, and I just would hope that you take some of these ideas in hand. So thank you.
I do know they are being communicated to the author.
Yes, thank you, Vice President Dolan. Again, this is Assemblymember Cooper's bill, and we are happy to provide whatever comments the board gives direction to pass that along to his office for consideration. And we will also defer to Ms. Freeman and her assuming the bill makes it back over to the Assembly side. And so maybe this is a good time for me to just talk about next steps. When the legislature returns back from session, we expect it to go to the Fiscal Committee on the Senate side and then to the Senate floor. If it passes there, it would then go back to the Assembly side. And we can also work with Ms. Freeman on amendments as well.
Mr. McDonald and I toured with Mr. Kerr portions of the American River Levee, and we viewed and talked about what was there. We did not discuss what he talked about today. Mr. Countryman?
I haven't had time to digest what Clyde has said here, but I would tend to disagree with it. To say we're only concerned with this levee cross-section, I think, is misguided completely. The damage that can be done to the system riverward from the levee is very significant. You cannot do maintenance that's required waterward of the levee. If you got camps like we saw last week when we were out there, linearly along where all this vegetation and everything were. So I think that it needs to include more than just the levee cross-section. I think it would be woefully inadequate if it was restricted to just the levee cross-section. But again, I haven't really had a chance to talk with Clyde about what his thoughts were on this, and that's just my first impression.
Mr. Countryman, were you one of the board members who took the tour? Okay. Oh, welcome, Mr. Vines. All right. Mr. Ramirez, do you have any comments on your tour? Okay. Oh, you were not able to do that. Well, we didn't know, because we didn't go as a board. We just went if we could make their timeline. Oh,
I'd just like to comment on two things. First, on Joe's comment, I think what I think it would work would be something like, you can't do it on the levee, and you can't do it within 20 feet of the levee, like I suggested, in the sign. Some distance like that, but if we want to step out in, the American River Parkway, something like 2,000 feet wide, and there's a couple thousand people out there that are camping. I mean, I totally agree with Joe, but do we want to, put our arms around that and say, well, we'll take that responsibility for that? And if we're going to make it illegal, just like the city of Boise did, then we're going to have a responsibility to what do we do? So there's that. And then the second point, typically when a bill leaves the Senate and goes back to the Assembly, it doesn't get amended in the other house, it's just for concurrence. So the amendments would need to be in the Senate. Thank you.
any other board reports or comments? Ms. Freeman?
So Clyde's right. When the bill comes to our committee, it will be for concurrence. So what we're committed to doing, and the board is supportive of the effort that's being made right here in Mr. Cooper's bill, we would like to continue to work with the board members over the next, it's really not a lot of time, 3 to 4 weeks, to refine the language, have one set of amendments, and then move forward so that the bill, by the time that it comes to the Assembly, although we will pull it and we will hear it in our committee, is ready and is ready for the final vote. So we're committed to doing that, and the chair is supportive of all of the work that's been done, especially by the staff of the board itself.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
so would I like then request if we could receive the comments, and we have Board Member McDonald's, and if there's, if others feel the same way, we'd love to receive those comments as soon as possible, and then we can work that on the back end with staff in the legislature. Present those to Assemblymember Cooper's office as well, if that's the will of the board.
Yes, it would need to be. So thank you for that. Mr. McDonald will do that. They also have a transcript.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you to step aside just to see if there's anyone else in the audience who wanted to address this issue. Been done then. Mr. Soon, do you have any concluding remarks?
Just want to thank the board and their involvement on this critical issue. We've received a lot of positive comments from throughout the valley about this bill and what it will help with maintenance on our levee system, and look forward to seeing it to fruition.
Thank you for that. I am reminded that this came forward at the request and imperative need for some other tool from our local maintaining agencies who have an obligation to operate and maintain the levees for the safety of people's lives and protection of property. So this just didn't come without a great deal of concern and hope for additional tools to resolve this public safety issue. You don't have to go too far.
Okay. Yes.
That concludes item 7.
Yes.
And we will proceed to item 8, which we call a listening session. Our governor, Gavin Newsom, issued an executive order and asked for agencies and others associated with water in any fashion, and we do because we deal with water through being a flood board, but also for multi-benefits of the flood system, to think through what would be appropriate, needed, recommended for a state water policy process. So we are having, this is the second, and we will have others as we develop the flood board's response to the governor's request. So Mr. Soon, again, has helped us organize this and make presentations, so I will ask you to introduce who we're going to hear from today officially, and then at the conclusion of that, we'll see if anyone else wants to talk to us.
Okay. Thank you, Vice President Dolan. Darren Soon, still with the board. As you mentioned, the executive order N-10-19 is issued by the governor talked about developing a water resilience portfolio and that accommodates needs of California through the 21st century. Last month, as a reminder, you heard from many of our flood control agencies and local maintaining agencies on this matter as it pertained to flood protection. And despite what, the separation of hearing from today, we're hearing from many of the non-governmental organizations. Despite that separation, we want you to know, and you know, I know you know, that these two are interlinked. Our flood system is part of a much larger live and ecosystem that has many benefits, and we're going to hear from several speakers today that are going to highlight that and how the ecosystem and our flood management system can operate in tandem. So today we have Ellen Hanak with the Public Policy Institute of California, Kelly Cook representing the Conservation and Natural Resources Group. Kelly's done a great job in organizing a group of other speakers to come before us today, of which Renee Henry from Trout Unlimited, Aisha Massel from American Rivers, Julie Rentner from River Partners, Barry Nelson from Golden State Salmon Association, and Jacob Katz from Cal Trout. So I look forward to, or we will look forward to a very informative session from these folks, after which we'll take public comment. So first of all, I'm going to introduce, and I haven't seen her. Is Ellen here yet? Okay. Not see Ellen here this morning, so I think we'll skip Ellen for now, and then we're going to move straight to Kelly Cook with Conservation and Natural Resources Group.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Kelly Cook with Conservation and Natural Resources Group. You are going to hear this morning from a few organizations that participate in a group that we call the Flood Study Group, and I wanted to give you some context for what we are and how long we've been together before you hear from them. So I am a consultant who helps facilitate coordination between participants in the Flood Study Group who has been meeting since 2011. These groups got together in 2011 to help provide input and coordinate a strategy for providing input on the development of the 2012 flood plan, and they have been meeting and continuing to coordinate since that time, which is great. The Flood Study Group is comprised of a collection of nonprofits with a common goal of advancing multi-benefit flood management in California, particularly in the Central Valley. And they represent a broad array of experience, from technical expertise to projects on the ground to policy perspectives that they're going to present today. I think it's important to note the Flood Study Group is not a coalition so much as it is a forum for these groups to get together, to share information, to exchange ideas, and when appropriate, to coordinate their strategy on shared objectives. There have been a series of points since 2011 when they have coordinated on particular initiatives. They were instrumental in the development and the inclusion of the conservation strategy that is now in the flood plan. They've coordinated on a series of projects on the ground, and several of the participants in the Flood Study Group also participate as part of the Flood Board Coordinating Committee. So these groups recently have put together a series of policy recommendations that they would like to share with you today, germane to flood management in California. And what you're going to hear represents a series of points of agreement between these groups on what they believe to be important next steps for California to take on a climate resilience flood approach in California. So with that, I will let our first speaker, Renee Henry from Trout Unlimited, come up to the podium and give his first presentation. Thank you.
Ms. Cook, are you going to indicate each person, or do they know their order and are going to just come forward? They know their order and they're going to come forward. They're going to say their name and organization. Good morning.
Morning. These mics working okay? There we go. Good morning, Vice President Dolan, members of the board, Super nice to be here with you all. Despite your comments about, people not giving space to the mind and the heart and words, I consistently find that this is a space where those things have room. So I appreciate that every time I come here to see and engage. It's refreshing. Could use a lot more of that in the world. So I just wanted to lead off. I only have 5 slides. I wanted to lead off by just kind of a little review of where we've been in the last several years. I think we were really excited and remain excited about the 2012 plan and the 2017 update because it really put forward a new vision for an integrated approach to flood management in the Central Valley. And so I want to talk about that vision and then talk a little bit about some of the strategies that the advisory committee to the flood board, which was sort of like an unprecedented collaboration across stakeholder groups, came up with, and then just check in to see how we're doing on those strategies and think about what we could maybe do to continue to move them forward. And then some of my colleagues will do a deeper dive on specific areas of those things. Works. Oh, look at that. So, the vision for the integrated flood system in my paraphrase that the flood plan put forward was really increased safety, recovering habitat for key species, delivering water, and keeping ag lands productive. There's other components of it for sure, but I would call that sort of 4 core pillars of this integrated vision. And in thinking in that way, it really took a landscape scale perspective on the Central Valley, these flood regions that are part of these basins, that are part of this whole valley. Took an outcomes-based approach and really overtly guided by measurable objectives and built in this concept of actually tracking performance based on those objectives, which is awesome. It's hard to know. It's hard to get where you're going if you don't know where you want to go, and it's nice to track your progress to figure out how far you've gotten towards that. And then also an integrated approach, so integrated across the landscape, but also integrated with other agencies, with other state and federal efforts and requirements. There's so many regulatory processes, so many active planning and implementation processes that relate to the flood system. And I think there is a real recognition that in order to make best use of our energy and resources, it made sense to try to bring as much alignment to those as possible. And, as I mentioned, and you're all aware, we spent a bunch of time in this advisory committee to the flood board through the gateway of the conservation strategy, but really talking about what are all the outcomes we want to see from a functional flood system. What are these broad concepts of this vision? What do they look like in application? And the advisory committee put together some strategies and some recommendations and presented those to the board, and they were adopted and included in the plan after a lot of really great collaboration with the board and with DWR. And so I just want to review those really quickly in sort of course. So the first key strategy was to develop funding, and I won't read the whole list, but anything we do requires money. We all know that. So there's a long list of things that we needed money for, from incorporating a lot of the different benefits into flood projects to making sure that OMR, R&R is taken care of, to facilitating that integration, tracking our progress. All those things that were named as part of that integrated vision require the funding necessary to do it. Develop a process to evaluate projects. So there's a lot of different components of that, which I'll get into more in the specific recommendations the committee came up with. But there's really a sense that's like, if we we need to know what a good project is. We need to have bars for a good project, and we need to track our progress and understand how we're doing. Like, are we meeting our objectives? Are we getting where we need to be in terms of how the system is operating? Make sure that in this new multi-benefit context, O&M is taken care of, that it's included, that it's not something that